This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it's time for Avoid the Maze. It's your story, or it's mine, or it's the story of my guest, Theresa Alexander Inman. Um, I just want everybody out there to know that if you didn't get invited to somebody's house this weekend to go swimming, for a picnic, or whatever was going on, you know what? You're not the only one who wasn't invited. You know, you are going through the same journey that we all are. And the one thing that we have to understand is we can survive this if we stop thinking about woe is me. So my guest today is going to give us a little information about her journey and maybe, identify those beautiful pictures behind her, which I just asked her about. So let's get started, Theresa, and welcome.
Thank you, Karen. I am just thrilled to be here. I love to share anything that could help people. Because again, like you said, we are not alone. And a lot of times, because I know so many times along my journey, I felt alone. Even though I had family members around me and loved ones around me, I felt so alone and isolated at so many different parts of my life. And I realized that everything has to come from within me because again, people don't know what you're going through. And a lot of times we don't know how to articulate what we're going through. So then they really can't help us or not able to help us.
Exactly. Exactly. And, you know, we talk about a lot, at least I do on this program, is that we hear these voices in our heads. And many of us have been programmed to think, oh, if you're hearing voices, you're mentally unstable. And the reality of it is, no, we all hear these voices and these thoughts because we've picked them up along our journey. And one of the voices I always heard was, you're not good enough. And yep, and I know no one ever told me that. Now that I go back and I think about where did that come from? Maybe I heard it said to somebody else. Maybe I read it in a book. I don't know. But I took that on myself. I wasn't good enough. So if I go back even 25 years from now, um, I would not be doing this podcast with you because I would say, I'm not good enough.
Yeah, I can so relate to that. But honestly, in my case, I was told when I was, I believe, maybe 12, 13 years old, that I would never amount to anything. So I was actually told that. And I believed it for a long time. And all the things that they said I was going to do, I did. That I would be, a teenage mother. My first son who actually painted these behind me, I had him when I was 18. I was told that in Canada, we call it, mother's allowance. So I'd be on mother's allowance and all of that. And I did all of that until I realized I'm the captain of my own ship, right? I was allowing other people to direct where I was going in life. And I had to stop and just take the reins. And Dre taught me so much because at his, young age, he's transitioned now. He passed in 2018. However, he is still with me. But he taught me so much about embracing life and, just being, he said, you have to know what you're worth, and, you talked about not being good enough. For a couple of years, I had written on my bathroom mirror, and it was a couple of years I had it written on there until it permeated my soul that I am enough. I wrote it on there. So every time I stepped into that bathroom and looked at that mirror, it reminded me that I am enough.
I love it because you're talking about how your son helped you move forward. Okay. I have two sons, and my youngest son was the one who pushed me forward. He was diagnosed on the autism spectrum when he was 6 years old. So one day he was this normal little boy, and the next day, oh my God, he has special needs. And so I became this different person. I became this advocate because it was like, he's no different than he was yesterday. He may need a little additional help, but why are we treating him differently? But as people treated him differently, I allowed them to treat me differently. And so as he was getting ready to graduate college, and it was the college I was working at, he walked in my office one day and he said, "You are the most unhappy person I've ever met." And I froze. And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You love what you do, but you don't love doing it here. You are miserable. When are you going to see that?" And it took me about 6 months. And when I left, I was scared. I'm sure any step you took it along the way. But I kept listening to him. If he saw it in me, who else saw it in me? So I didn't put it on my mirror. I should have. Okay. But so what were some of the things that your son saw that he was influencing you?
Well, he was very spiritual. And actually from day one, he had always been very perceptive. And it's interesting because I have two sons. My younger son is still, here with me. And, but he always talked about the fact that, because I guess he saw me put everybody first, and did not do much to take care of myself. It's like I would never shop for my kids at a thrift store, but I would wear everybody's hand-me-downs,
Yep.
And so, they saw that. They saw that I always put them first. And, because I didn't know how to take care of myself. I neglected myself because of all the stories I allowed myself to receive, right? And now knowing that I don't have to receive them, but for a long time, I did. I allowed all those things to replay in my mind. Even though I was an A student, you're not smart enough, because one day I came home with an A plus, and from there on, the expectation was an A plus. So if I came home with an A, it's like, where's the plus? And I thought, you know what? I can never please these people. I just gave up. I'm like, it's just never going to happen, and I let it go. And it took just feeling the love from my children, because we would have meetings. I would ask them to rate me as a mother, because honestly, theirs were the only opinions I wanted to care about. And I would ask them to rate me as a mother, and they're like, "Mom, you're great." I'm like, "Well, there must be some area I need help in and something I need to improve in." And they were always so gracious, never once saying, "Well, you could do this and you could do that." They always focused on the positive. And I wish even then I had I had what they gave me, to the ability to focus on the positive and not look at, the things and the stories and all the other things that I allowed to beat me down.
And obviously, you were doing something which you didn't realize. You were feeding them positivity.
Mhm.
And so you knew what was nurturing. You just weren't nurturing yourself.
Right. Yeah.
And many of us, we can go our whole life without nurturing ourselves. But those of us, many of us today are finally getting to a point, and I don't care what that age is, but there's an age that we reach and we go, maybe I've lived the majority of my years, but theoretically, I have a lot more years to go. Do I want to still live like this? Or what can I do to change? So, what were some of the things that you did that made you change?
The first thing, again, was writing that I am, to have me realize that I am enough, that, everything that I need to be, right, to realize my beautiful destiny is in me. And once I realized that, I was able to really just look at what how far I've come, right? Because I started out as I was born in Dominica, grew up in a little village of Coolidistri, walking around barefoot because I love barefoot. Not that we couldn't afford shoes, but I love walking around barefoot. You know, and a cousin of mine and I the other day were just saying, like, imagine, look at us, two little girls from Cooley Vistry, and look at us today, right? Like she's actually receiving her doctorate and, you know, an honorary doctorate, and she's doing so much to help the world. And I don't know if you know, but I love, my passion is working with children with autism to help them. And the more I do that, and I don't want to say do because for me, it's more than just doing, right? It's being. The more I am this person who empowers parents and helps them along, you know, to avoid the maze that we know once they get that diagnosis, it becomes a maze, right? To
Yeah.
help straighten out, to flatline that whole situation for them to make it easy. The more I immerse myself in that, the more I find, like, the more passionate I get about life because I see what I was meant for. I see why I'm here. You know, it's like when I talk to my younger son, Lee, you know, I talk about my babies. He's like, Mom, do you mean Dre and I, or do you mean the ones that you work with? You know, because he, right? So, yeah, so I started really coming on that journey of self-actualization, and really meditation has really helped me. You know, just taking those moments and listening to that voice that you talk about, right? Just listening and knowing, and honestly, that voice is us, right? It's our higher self, I believe. And just taking that time to really listen and go in has really helped me just avoid the noise and to do the things and not get worried about what people are thinking and saying, and all, because all of those things kept me back, right? What will people think? What will people say? How are they going to feel? um Not to say that I don't care, but it doesn't really matter anymore, because if I am operating at my highest self, I'm going to bring others with me, right? Because when we're down in the doldrums, we bring people down there with us without even realizing it. So when we, you know, when we embrace life, right? When we become, when we, and it's a become, we're always becoming, right? We've never
Yeah.
become. I say Dre has become because he's elevated to that higher realm, and, you know, he's doing all the things. However, as we continue to become, right, to get to that place, it's not about what people think and say, because if we listen to that, we can't even help them, right?
Exactly.
Because they're operating from their own programs, from where they are, and maybe they're not where we are. So we want to act in a way that we're going to bring them, that could attract them to a better life, right? Attract them to who they really are, to finding out and realizing who they really are.
You know, it's interesting because when I first found out my son was on the spectrum, I was very angry at first. It was like, how do you tell me one day he's okay and the next day? And then why are you telling me that I have to change everything that we're doing? And now that I look back, we shouldn't have changed 90% of what we were doing, but we did. But until he was about, he was diagnosed at 6, until he was about 25 years old, I had this angry thing in me and I didn't know what it was. And it was angry because I was listening to all these people who said, this is what you do with a child who's on the spectrum. And I'd look at him and he became a speaker, and he would go to schools and he would tell kids, you know, don't let anybody give you a label. And yet in my head, he still had a label.
Yes.
And when he turned 25, it was funny because his neurologist told us when he first diagnosed him, he said, you know, I have a feeling by the time he's 25 years old, he will have matured. He will grow into the best part of autism. And I looked at him and I thought, what does that mean? And almost exactly on his 25th birthday, he matured. He he spoke differently. He cared differently. He's, you know, he's my, like your son, he's like my shining light. But he also helped me. And it was like all those labels, Mom, we had, got to get rid of them.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I tell parents all the time, that label is just there to get you the help that you need, and that's all it is. Your child is not a label. Don't succumb to that label. And also, you are the expert with respect to your child. So if you're doing something that works, you do that thing. Whatever your gut tells you to do, that's what you do, not what the so-called experts tell you. And I mean, I consider myself an expert, but I'm saying this, right? It's not about what the experts say, it's about what you feel is right. Now, there are times I will challenge parents' feelings and their beliefs if I feel that it's really not aligned with where I see their child going. I might say, okay, I understand you feel this way, but is it because of what other people are saying? Are people dictating to you how you should feel and what you should do? And if it's something that you truly feel in your gut, then hey, I'm going to say go with it. If it's not, if it's because of the chatter of the world that's starting to affect what you do and how you feel, then, you know, something needs to change because yes, you are the expert with respect to your child. You know your child better. Partner with the person who's giving you that advice. Find out, okay, what is their rationale for that? And talk to them about, okay, you know what? Maybe this won't work for me, but how about if we do it this way, right? So that way you're an active part of it instead of feeling like you've given up the reins and you don't have a say because you do. The ultimate say is yours.
And that's what avoid the maze is all about. It's about, you're walking through life and you're doing things, and then you stop and you go, do I really want to go to the right? Do I want to go to the left? Or maybe I should turn around and go back and retrace my steps. And I didn't truly understand that until I started podcasting. And my first podcast, I had gone to another internet station and I said, I have this great idea for a podcast. And they looked at me like I was totally crazy. They said, have you ever done it? And I said, no, but I'm a communications major. I can do it. And I went into that first show, and yes, I did it. And I realized that, wow, all the things I thought I couldn't do, I did so many of them in less than an hour. And just because I do it doesn't mean you can or somebody else can. You can, but you got to do it your way. And I love how you said, listen to your gut. How does it make you feel? If you're doing something that you think is right, but you're hurting inside, it's not the right path.
Exactly. Yes, so true. And it is so, so, so important that we do that. And the other thing I want to say is just when we hear things, take a moment, just take a moment to feel it. Is it right for me? Is it right for me? And if it doesn't feel right, and the answer may not come to you right then, but get quiet because that's when we hear, I have a friend and we always talk about, I didn't listen to that soft, swell voice again, and here I am. Yeah. And yeah, and like you said, we all have different gifts, right? And I also podcast and I do it very differently than you because we all, again,
Sure.
if we all do things the same, life would be boring, right? If we're all arms, how would we, right? If
Yeah.
we're all legs, whatever it is, we all need the different parts of the body to be able to function, to make this life, this experience that we're having on this earth, to make it rich and exciting. So whatever it is, I have parents who, their children have been diagnosed with autism and they've become advocates, they've become speakers. That child brought out their gifts, like my friend Timothy Stutz always says, you don't always get the child you want, but you get the child that you need. Right? The
I
child will help take you out of your comfort zone because there's no growth inside of your comfort zone. And when we embrace that, then, oh my goodness, it's limitless. We are limitless. We realize our limitless nature.
So tell me a little bit about your podcast, because as I tell my listeners and I tell my guests, I prepare, but I prepare just a little bit because I want the conversation to be natural. I want my listeners to hear some of the mistakes, okay? Because that's what life is all about. Um, but you're right, we all have different ways of doing it. So tell us a little bit about how you got into it and what your mission is with it.
Wow. Karen, it is just so funny that you say that because I tell my listeners exactly the same thing. I prepare just a little bit because I want it to be an authentic conversation. So, oh my goodness, that is just fun. So yeah, my podcast is called Parenting with Confidence, and it covers a range of different, like, parenting, but it comes from the parents' perspective. And like, I want to empower parents so they can do it with confidence, right? So whether it's self-care, whether it's, letting them know, okay, we talk about ADHD and autism and different things, and then we always come back to self-care as well, because it's so important. If you don't care for yourself, there's nothing you can do for your child. Your child deserves your best self. And if you don't give that to them, you're doing not only your child a disservice, but you, because then you don't get to realize the awesomeness that is your child and the amazing relationship that you can really get when you are present, when you are rested, when you have done something to fulfill yourself, because your child is seeing everything that you do. They become you. I mean, think back. I mean, I've become my mother. Like, who have you become?
Yeah, my family says I have become my mother. You are, you hit it on the nose. You know, it's interesting how you say that so many of us don't understand the self-care. I never really understood. My only self-care was, oh, I'm gonna go get my hair done. Okay. But maybe I won't get it cut this time because I don't want to add the extra money on it. It was like, I'm taking care of myself, but I'm not taking care of myself. But I remember when my son was 11 years old, we were introduced to respite care. Didn't totally understand it. In fact, I was told from the county that we absolutely had to take it. I thought that meant I was a bad parent. I just, it was like, well, why do I have to send him off with this strange family for the weekend? And they kept saying, it's very important. I remember calling his doctor, asking the same thing. He said, you're going to burn out. They see it, take it. That weekend, my husband and I, we argued all weekend. We didn't know how to take the time for ourselves. We didn't prepare for his coming back on Sunday. We didn't do self-care. He came back on Sunday. We were worn out. He was flying high. He had a great time. He was with kids his age. The parents he was with, they controlled things, which we weren't controlling as well. It took me a number of years to understand what respite was, that it didn't mean I was a bad parent. In fact, it meant I was a good parent who needed to take care of me. How do you help parents understand that? And not just parents, but individuals. You could work 60, 70 hours a week, but unless there's some self-care in there, you're going to burn out.
Yes, absolutely. And in my field of behavior analysis, and I'm also an infant toddler developmental specialist, because we pour so much into the families that we work with, burnout is a thing. And then also, there is a shortage of people doing what I do. So we feel compelled to want to help everyone. And interestingly, right now, I'm taking a leave of absence because I realize I cannot help every family because there's so many families out there who need help. And the best way I can help families is to take care of myself. And I tell the same thing to the families I work with, the moms, the dads, even if it's a 10-minute walk. Do it for you, because self-care is actually the most unselfish thing you can do. Because a lot of times parents feel that self-care is selfish. It's actually selfless, because then you're taking the time to be a better parent. You're taking the time to observe. You're taking the time, like, then you can observe and really get to know your child, right? Because I walk into families' homes and I get on the floor with their kid and I'm playing around, rolling around, and a child who wasn't talking will all of a sudden say a word. And they're like, how did you do that? Because first of all, I'm relaxed. You're stressed because you haven't taken care of you. I've done things to take care of me now that I know. In the beginning, I didn't.
Right,
So I've done things to take care of myself. I want you to take care of yourself. Even if it's, sitting and having a cup of coffee or cocoa, whatever it is that moves you, reading a couple of pages from a book, taking a walk, taking a hot bath, whatever it is, or sitting in silence, whatever it is that you feel that your body, your spirit, your soul, just whatever you want to call it, needs to rejuvenate, do that thing. Call in somebody to help you, because the people who do it the best end up being the best, right? The people who are afraid, because I don't want somebody to come into my house and judge me because it's dirty. I don't want, and these are stories I've heard. I don't want somebody, I don't want people to think I'm a bad parent because I can't do it myself. We were made to be in community. We are social beings. We're not meant to figure it out ourselves. That's why so many people have different gifts, because if we all, then we'd have everything in us and we
right.
wouldn't need anybody else, right? We need other people. So embrace that and know it's not because, and I don't like using those judgmental terms of good and bad. It's just that you need help. We all need help. Embrace that help. When we embrace the village, remember a long time ago when it took a child to raise it still takes a child to raise
Right.
it still takes a village to raise a
As a
child.
child, yes.
Right? However, because of our own issues, whatever they are, we've decided we don't want people in our business and the village is just this and that. But create your village, find your village, because that's where you will find you are the best parent. I've talked to many parents about it and I always ask them about the village. And the ones who have that village, they are so empowered because they have other people to talk to. They have other people that they can lean on when needed.
You
So
know,
I know
the
that's a
in-
long answer to a
yeah,
short question.
the interesting part is I didn't develop my village until my mother fell ill and I went to live with her for the last 2.5 months of her life. It was during that time period, I was 4 hours away from home. My son would call me daily and he'd go, Mom, I know you need to be there, but are you taking care of yourself? And I will say, my mother's caregivers also would push me out the door. They'd say, I don't care if you're out for 5 minutes, go outside. It was hot and humid. They said, I don't care if it's hot and humid, go feel it. And all of a sudden, I realized, even though I was staying with her because I felt I needed to take care of her, I was there for her, but I allowed those villagers to come in and do the things that they were good at. And I did what I was good at. I wasn't good at, changing her clothes and maintaining her. Okay. But was I good at helping her with the meal? Absolutely. Was I good at sitting there and, listening to music with her? I was good at that. Was I good at letting her telling me her stories of the past? Yes. And so after she passed away, one of the caregivers had stayed very close to me and she kept saying, you didn't have this when you were raising your son, did you? I said, no. My husband and I did it 100%. I had a wonderful mother-in-law who lived close by. But she didn't know what to do. And so it took my energy to tell her what to do. Um, but I'm grateful for what she did. But I didn't understand that I could maybe pick up the phone and ask somebody, you know what? I just need to go take a walk. Can you come sit in my house while I go take a walk? Today he's on his own. He's doing well. He's 1,000 miles away from me. We talk regularly, but I take time for me. And I'm better for my husband, but the best thing is I'm better for me.
Yes, yes. And when we're better for us, we're better for everybody else, right? Because that energy that you exude, that energy, and people feel it, and they want to know what you have, and then you can share. How did you get there, right? How did you come from, like part of my story too, my second son was born prematurely. And man, I was scared. Oof, it was a rough time because I didn't know what to do. We were sent home until come back in 3 months. I'm like, what am I supposed to be doing in 3 months? It's like I didn't have the wherewithal to ask what I should have been doing in those 3 months. I just went home and just did. And thankfully, I am what I've learned is I was a conscious competent, an unconscious competent. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was doing it right somehow. We went in 3 months and like, okay, he's doing great. Come back in 6 months, come back in 9 months. And at 9 months, they had him, I'll never forget, they had him put some shapes in a shape sorter. And we didn't have a shape sorter at home. We weren't the toy having family. We were the get together and do things. We're talking, we're playing, but my kids didn't have kids' toys, whatever those were. And but he put all the shapes in the right shape. He put all the shapes in the
Yep.
right hole. And I was just like, okay, how did you do that? Because you've never done that before. You've never seen this thing. And they're like, listen, you don't need to come back. I was like, oh, okay, that's all it took. And so, which is actually fuel for what I do today, because I want parents to understand, because I have questions still. He's 38 years old, and I still think, is there something I could have done better? Something I could have done differently? And I just operated from my gut. I just operated from what I felt was the right thing for my child. And it turns out it was. Now, yes, some children need additional help, but you don't have to throw the kitchen sink, right? That's what I've learned. You don't have to do everything. I always tell parents, pick the one thing that you feel you can do right now and do that thing, do it well, and then we can move to something else. Because if you try to do everything all at once, it just becomes chaotic. Not within yourself, within your own mind, your own body. It's chaotic because what else am I supposed to do? Blah, 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 blah. And you end up it ends up being a mess.
And that's one of the things that I have learned over the years. And when I do talk to parents who have children on the spectrum, I tell them, your child is your child. He's not somebody else's. He or she is going to do things in their way. And I remind people, if we're not on the spectrum, did we do the same thing as the kids next door? Probably not. I mean, I remember, I probably was maybe 10 or 11 years old. And I have two older brothers, and the one in the middle, very talented. He could pick up an instrument and just play it. He was artistic. I mean, he just had it. And my mother one day said to me, "You're never going to be like your brother Joel." And to me, that was just heartbreaking. And it was like, well, what does that mean? If I'm not going to be like him, who am I going to be like? And I don't think she meant it in that way, because we talked about it many years later. And she said, when he would pick up the trumpet and play it, you would try to pick it up and play it. He played it, you didn't. I was just trying to tell you that you didn't have to do his things, find your things. And I said, I just wish you would have said it that way. But she said, I didn't know how to say it any differently. And so that's one of the things I try to tell everyone, that maybe you heard something at one point that directed you. Go back and think about it. Was it done to hurt you? think about the person who said it, and typically we'll walk away going, no, guess she didn't know how to say that any differently. Okay, now break it apart. What is it that you like to do? What is it you want to do? Because they're two different things sometimes, okay? And put your energy into what makes you happy. And when I started podcasting almost 13 years ago, I said to my husband, I'm not going to make the money I was making. He goes, "But then we're just going to have to change our lifestyle, aren't we?" He said, "Are you going to be happy?" I said, "I can't promise you." He said, "Well, if you're not happy, then we'll have to find something else for you to do." And I would say 95% of the time, I'm happy. Yeah, I have my downtime. I'll take that 5%. So
Yeah.
when you saw this change in yourself, did you feel it in your head, in your stomach, in your, because we all feel it somewhere, but we're not mindful of it.
Yeah. I feel things in my solar plexus. It's like always right here.
Yep.
It tells me when it's time to change something. Like I always feel it's so strange. Like I realized it, oh gosh, a few years ago, I was in a job that was super stressful. And I started to have this feeling here. And I thought, oh, what does that mean? And honestly, it came to me, it's time to leave that job. And I thought, oh, but I just got here. Like it's only been a year and blah, blah, blah. And, God, didn't you give me this job already? You want me to leave? And it's so interesting because I didn't listen. And later that year, I was asked to leave the job. And I thought, oh, well, maybe if you had listened, life would have been different. So now I've learned to listen. And that had to happen because honestly, 2 days later, I received an offer for a job. And while I was still in my bed, that paid me more than double what I was being paid for working less and doing something that truly fulfills me. Yeah. So I had to get out of my own way. So yeah, that feeling in my solar plexus, whenever it comes, I've learned to listen to it because if I don't, it can be problematic for me. Well, and it's not like it's horrible, but it just means I'm delaying what's meant for me or I have to start again.
Yes. And I took a course, and in the course they were talking about the fact that if you don't feel something somewhere in your body, good or bad, that you have to step away. You almost have to look inside yourself and ask yourself, like, why aren't I feeling? What is going on? What is blocking me? And when I started coaching, um, I was expecting, oh, I'm coaching this niche. I know I'm going to be successful. And within a year, oh, everything's going to be wonderful. And when it wasn't happening, instead of getting upset with myself, I took a step back and I said, truthfully, no business really expands in a year where you can sit back and go, oh, look at me. Um, because not only am I coaching, I'm podcasting, I'm doing social media, I'm doing all these other things. And so I had to give myself the grace. But I realized when I started to feel that way, I had a shoulder injury
Mm.
and I was going to physical therapy. And the days that I felt good because I had just come off of a podcast or coaching a client, my therapist would say to me, wow, you got a lot of good movement in that arm. How does it feel today? And I'd say, tolerable on a scale of 0 to 10. Where would you say you are? 2 or 3? Wow, the last couple of weeks you've been at a 10. You've come in crying. And that's when I start to realize when that shoulder gets really, really bad, I have to step away and ask myself, number one, did you overuse it? Because that could cause the pain. And if that's not the case, what else is going on. And sometimes we don't like doing that because sometimes what we see is not what we want. So you're taking this leave of absence. What geared you up to it, and what do you plan on doing?
So it's interesting because I was working with as an infant toddler developmental specialist, I work with children up to the age of 3. And so all of my clients aged out. The last one aged out May 31st. So I just looked at it as I was being sent a message. And then I work with the school district, and that ended um June. No, I said, yeah, it was around the same time too, the end of May. So I thought everything is ending at the same time. So that means I need to take a break for myself and just be. So I am actually working on ways to improve my podcast in that time and ways to improve me, you know, just focusing on me, taking walks every morning with my 2 dogs and just doing things, sometimes just being, it might be a little writing just to get things out of my head, attending summits, just focusing on improving this vessel so that when I come out of it, I can, I'm ready to soar because I know there are a lot of things that I've been doing that don't serve me. So I'm just reflecting on those things. And thankfully, I have this amazing husband who's just amazing and and allows me the time to, to do those things. So yeah, so I'm going to be visiting family. I'm actually taking a road trip to visit family up in Toronto. And I want to drive because I want that time just so I can be and see and yeah, embrace nature and just all the things without all the noise. If you've got a client at this time, you've got this at that time, blah, 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 all the other things that keep us from being.
It's interesting because I took a week off. I was down in Texas visiting my youngest son, and I told all my clients I'm taking this week off. If it's an emergency, you can send me an email, but nobody, I mean, my clients, it's not like I'm a doctor or anything that, it's that much of an emergency. Um, and I recommended things that people could do while I was off, which I found that many of my clients all of a sudden started journaling, which they refused to do. But now they were journaling because it was like, well, I don't have you to talk it out with. So I'm talking it out with myself. And I did the same thing. I did so much journaling while I was away with him. And it was, as much as it was nice being there, it was stressful because he was working the whole time. And so the time he thought he was going to be able to spend with me, he wasn't able to. And I just thought, I'm not going to let it disturb me. I'm going to let him know it's okay. And when I came home, within 24 hours, I was sick. And I was sick for about a week. But I realized why. Because I came home and I jumped right back into things. I didn't take my time to get back to work. And I got very worried. I called my doctor and I said, I'm short of breath all the time. And we had this a couple years ago and we got it under control. And why am I short of breath? And in talking to me on the phone, he goes, can you slow down? And I thought to myself, oh my God, I got off the plane at 9 o'clock in the evening, had to wait for an hour for my husband to come pick me up. So it was 10:30, hadn't eaten all day. And I had my first call the next morning at 8 o'clock. And I was working straight through my days because I was picking up what I had missed. And the reality of it is, I should not have done that. And I know that, and I won't do that in the future.
Yes, I cannot tell you how many times I've heard that same story. People say, "I'm not taking vacations again because it's your body needs to wind down, and then, like you said, slowly get back into it. You can't just, like it's like running into a brick wall. It hurts."
Yep. You are absolutely, and my husband has always said whenever we've gone away, and he's taken time off work, he always wants to come home either late on Saturday or very early on Sunday. So he has that day that he's unwinding. He said when we come back late on Sunday and he's got to go back to work on Monday, he's a mess. And I never understood it because I wanted to extend that vacation. But then I realized thinking back, those are my worst days too. I was jumping back in and whatever fun I had, it was gone. So I love it. So Theresa, how can my listeners find you and listen to your podcasts as well?
So my podcast, Parenting with Confidence, is on Apple and Spotify and Google and all of them. And actually, I've also written a book called How Can I Help My Child Communicate, which is a book to help parents with their children from birth to 3 to help give them those, to put those strategies in place to help their child develop those skills, those communication and social skills. And my website is theresaalexanderinman.com.
Well, we will have that all in the show notes, so there's no excuse for people not to find you. And I want to thank you for joining me today. And I love the artwork behind you. I mean, he is one talented young man.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day now. Bye-bye.
Thank you as well, Karen.